Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudire nashtiprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavatasevaya bhagavati uttam shloke bhaktir bhavati naistiki. So continuing with the discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 11, the symptoms of conditioned and liberated living entities. Text 16 onwards. Na stuvit na nindet kurvata sadva sadhuva vadata guna doshabhyam varjita samdring munihi. A saintly sage sees with equal vision and therefore is not affected by that which is materially good or bad. Indeed, although he observes others performing good and bad work and speaking properly and improperly, the sage does not praise or criticize anyone. Well, Prabhupada used to. He would call everybody rascals, you're fools and rascals. But his point was to preach. Internally, he would not see a difference. But externally, he had to preach and he had to train his disciples. So he had to use hardships. Na kuryan na vadet kinchin na dhyayet sadva sadhuva atma ramonya vritya vichare jadvan munihi. For the purpose of maintaining his body, a liberated sage should not act, speak, or contemplate in terms of material good or bad. Rather, he should be detached in all material circumstances and taking pleasure in self-realization. He should wander about, engaged in this liberated lifestyle, appearing like a retarded person to outsiders. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, this verse describes a type of discipline recommended for the Jnana yogis, who by intelligence try to understand that they are not their material bodies. One who is engaged in the devotion service of the Lord, however, accepts and rejects material things in terms of their usefulness in the loving service of Lord Krishna. One who is trying to preach Krishna consciousness should be seen as very intelligent and not jadvat or stunted as described here. Because the duty of Krishna conscious devotees is very different. They're not there just for themselves. Of course, here appear like a retarded person so others don't disturb him. Here, devotees go beyond that because they have to preach. They have to bring others to the platform of Krishna consciousness. Although a devotee of the Lord does not act, speak, or contemplate for his personal sense gratification, he remains very busy working, speaking, and meditating in the devotional service of the Lord. The devotee makes elaborate plans to engage all the fallen souls in Lord Krishna's service so that they can be purified and go back to Godhead. Merely rejecting material things is not perfect consciousness. One must see everything as a property of the Lord and meant for the Lord's pleasure. One busily engaged in spreading the Krishna consciousness movement has no time to make material distinctions and thus automatically comes to the liberated platform. So a devotee's platform or way of working is completely different. And as it is mentioned in the purport, Jiva Goswami is saying this verse is, the way it is explained, it's for Jnana yogis, not for devotees. Shabda Brahmani Nishnatu na Nishnayat Pareyati Shramastasya Shramafalo I Adhenum Iv Rakshataha. If through meticulous study, so see, this is for Jnana yogis, if through meticulous study one becomes expert in reading Vedic literature, but makes no endeavor to fix one's mind on the supreme personality of Godhead, then one's endeavor is certainly like that of a man who works very hard to take care of a cow that gives no milk. In other words, the fruit of one's laborious study of Vedic knowledge will simply be the labor itself. There will be no other tangible result. So study of Vedic literature should lead one to fixing one's mind on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna himself says in Bhagavad Gita, Vedasya sarvar ahameva vedya. By all the Vedas, Krishna is to be known. If he is not known, then we are not studying the Vedas. It's just a laborious study on it. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that the word Pare, the Supreme, in this verse indicates the Supreme Personality of Godhead, rather than the impersonal Brahman, because Lord Krishna, the speaker of these instructions, makes reference in later verses to his personality as the Supreme. An impersonal interpretation in this case would be Ekadesha Avanyottar, or a contradictory interpretation that creates illogical conflict with other shlokas. Of course, that's very technical. So later it is said, it requires great endeavor to take care of a cow. One must either grow food grains to feed the cow or maintain suitable pastures. If the pasture is not properly maintained, poisonous weeds will grow or snakes will multiply and there will be danger. Cows are infected by many types of diseases and bugs and must be regularly cleaned and disinfected. Similarly, fences must be maintained around the cow pasture, and there is even more work to be done. If the cow gives no milk, however, then one certainly performs hard labor with no tangible result. Means no tangible result in the sense that he is not getting the milk. But otherwise, cow service is always good, even if one doesn't get milk. But here the shloka is referring to something else. Laborious effort is also required to learn the Sanskrit language well enough to discern the subtle and esoteric meaning of the Vedic mantras. If after such great labor one does not understand the spiritual body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is the source of all happiness in life, and if one does not surrender to the Lord as a supreme shelter of all things, then one has certainly labored hard with no tangible result other than his own labor. And as Bhagavatam earlier says, Shrama eva hi kevalam. If anything we do, any dharma we follow, any effort we do, if it doesn't take us to have the affinity, to develop affinity for Krishna Katha, then it is Shrama eva hi kevalam. Even a liberated soul who has given up the bodily concept of life will fall down if it does not take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The word Nishnata or expert indicates that one must ultimately achieve the goal of life. Otherwise, one is not expert. As stated by Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Prema Pumarthu Maha. The actual goal of human life is love of Godhead. No one can be considered expert without achieving this goal. So too much study of Vedic scriptures, and for that one has to learn Sanskrit and so many other things, not just Sanskrit. There's Nyaya and grammar, there's so many things to be learned before we can even start to understand the scriptures. But if you don't understand Krishna through scripture, then what's the point? It's just a useless labor. Gama dugdha doham satim cha bharyam deham paradhina sat prajam cha vittam tvatirthi kritam angavacham hinam maya rakshati dukha dukhi. My dear Uddhav, that man is certainly most miserable who takes care of a cow that gives no milk, an unchaste wife, a body totally dependent on others, useless children, no wealth, not utilized for the right purpose. Similarly, one who studies Vedic knowledge devoid of my glories is also most miserable. So, hinam maya rakshati dukha dukhi. So, Krishna clearly says, my glories, means he's not talking about impersonal and he's not talking about demigods. He's talking about himself, person, Krishna. A human being is actually learned or expert when he understands that all material objects perceived through the various senses are expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that nothing exists without the support of the Supreme Lord. In this verse, through various examples, it is concluded that the power of speech is useless if not engaged for the Supreme Lord. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, this verse implies that all of the functions of the various senses are useless if they are not engaged in the glorification of God. Indeed, the Avadhuta Brahman previously stated to King Yadu that if the tongue is not controlled, one's entire program of sense control is a failure. One cannot control the tongue unless he vibrates the glories of the Lord, unless he uses the tongue in vibrating the glories of the Lord. So that is a real control of the tongue, actually. Not just like sometimes we see many munis, they say, oh, I'm not speaking, I have taken Mauna Vrat. So real Mauna Vrat is not using the tongue in anything else except service of Krishna. The example of the milkless cow is significant. The gentleman never kills a cow, and therefore when a cow becomes sterile and no longer gives milk, one must engage in the laborious task of protecting her, since no one will purchase a useless cow. For some time, the greedy owner of a sterile cow may continue thinking, I have already invested so much money in taking care of this cow, and certainly in the near future, she'll again become pregnant and give milk. But when this hope is proven futile, he becomes neglectful and indifferent to the health and safety of the animal. Because of such sinful neglect, he must suffer in the next life, after having already suffered because of the sterile cow in the present life. So, yes, it is labor, and it doesn't give any results, but one still has to take care of the cow. Similarly, although a man may discover that his wife is neither chaste nor affectionate, he may be so eager to get children that he goes on taking care of such a useless wife, thinking, I will teach my wife the religious beauties of a chaste woman. By hearing historical examples of great women, surely her heart will change and she will become a wonderful wife to me. Unfortunately, the unchaste wife in many cases does not change and also gives a man many useless children who are just as foolish and irreligious as she is. Such children never give any happiness to the father, yet the father tediously labors to take care of them. And this also happens. Also, one who has accumulated wealth by the mercy of God must be vigilant to give in charity to the right person and for the right cause. If such a right person or cause appears and one hesitates and selfishly does not give in charity, one loses his reputation. And in the next life, he will be poverty stricken. So charity is so important. Has to be given to the right person or the right cause. Otherwise, next life, he will be poverty stricken. One who fails to give properly in charity spends his life anxiously protecting his wealth, which ultimately brings him no fame or happiness. And in the next life, he has to suffer also. See, rules, laws of nature are amazing. The previous examples are given to illustrate the uselessness of laboriously studying Vedic knowledge that does not glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srila Jiva Goswami comments that the spiritual vibration of the Vedas is meant to bring one to the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord Krishna. Many processes for achieving the supreme truth are recommended in the Upanishads and other Vedic literatures. But because of their innumerable and seemingly contradictory explanations, commentaries, and injunctions, one cannot achieve the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, merely by reading such literature. If, however, one understands Sri Krishna to be the ultimate cause of all causes and reads the Upanishads and other Vedic literature as glorification of the Supreme Lord, then one can actually become fixed at the Lord's lotus feet. So that's why Prabhupada When Prabhupada gives his comment either on Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, Upanishad, he directly brought out bhakti, devotion service to Krishna, glories of Krishna in practically every purport. Because he knew this is what Krishna wants. Here it is clearly said by Krishna. For example, his Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada translated and commented upon Sri Ishopanishad in such a way that it brings the reader closer to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not to impersonal Brahm Jyoti or anything like that. Clearly, directly glorifies Krishna and Bhakti. Undoubtedly, the lotus feet of Lord Krishna are the only reliable boat by which to cross the turbulent ocean of material existence. Even Lord Brahma has stated in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam that if one gives up the auspicious path of bhakti and takes to fruitless labor of Vedic speculation, one is just like a fool who beats empty husks in hope of getting rice. So rice, the grains of rice, they have a husk around it, but there are empty husks also. So just beating the empty husk means taking up too much labor, but in the end, one doesn't get rice. Then what's the point in engaging in so much of labor? Srila Jiva Goswami recommends that one completely ignore dry Vedic speculation because it does not bring one to the point of devotion service to the absolute truth, Lord Shri Krishna. But people, those who are too much into Vedic study and this and that, they love to get into Vedic studies and the speculation, complete speculation. It doesn't take them anywhere, but just the satisfaction of their ego. That's all it is. Yasyam name pavanam anga karma sthiti udbhav prana nirodhamasya leelavatare psit janma vasaya vandhyam giram tam bibriyanna dhira. My dear Uddhav, an intelligent person should never take to literatures that do not contain description of my activities, which purify the whole universe. Indeed, I create, maintain, and annihilate the entire material manifestation. Among all my pastime incarnations, the most beloved are Krishna and Balaram. Any so-called knowledge that does not recognize these activities of mine is simply barren and is not acceptable to those who are actually intelligent. Wow. The words Leela Vatarepsit Janma are very significant. The Lord's incarnations for executing wonderful pastimes is called Leela Vatar, and such wonderful forms of Vishnu are glorified by the names Ramchandra, Narasimhadev, Kurma, Vara, and so on. Among all such Leela Avatars, however, the most beloved, even to this day, is Krishna, the original source of the Vishnu Tattva. The Lord appears in the prison house of Kansa and is immediately transferred to the rural setting of Vrindavan, where he exhibits unique childhood pastimes with his cowherd boyfriends, girlfriends, parents, and well-wishers. After some time, the Lord's pastimes are transferred to Mathura and Dwarka, and the extraordinary love of the inhabitants of Vrindavan is exhibited in their anguished separation from Lord Krishna. Such pastimes of the Lord are Ipsita, or the reservoir of all loving exchanges with the absolute truth. Pure devotees of the Lord are most intelligent and expert, and they do not pay any attention to useless, fruitless literatures that neglect the highest truth, Lord Krishna. Although such literatures are very popular among materialistic persons all over the world, they're completely neglected by the community of pure Vaishnavas. In this verse, the Lord explains that the literatures approved for the devotees are those that glorify the Lord's pastimes, as the Purusha Avatar and the Leela Avatar, and there's so many other avatars, culminating in personal appearance of Lord Krishna himself. So those are the pastimes of Krishna and Balaram, especially Krishna. They're the most enchanting. sweeter than anything else. Even Vedic literatures that neglect the Supreme Personality of Godhead should be ignored. This fact is also explained by Narad Muni to Srila Vyasadeva, the author of the Vedas, when the great Vedvyas felt dissatisfied with his work. So even Vyasadeva, who compiled all the Vedas, all of the Vedic literature, Itihas, Puran, Upanishads, and so many others, he was not satisfied. He wrote everything. So forget about people who are trying to study and trying to understand all this Vedic literature, how they can be satisfied. And when he was not satisfied, Narad Muni appeared and he told Vyasa, because you have not glorified the Lord and bhakti, how can you be satisfied and how can your readers be satisfied? And then he compiled Srimad Bhagavatam. Evam jigyasya apoya nanatva brahmamatmani uparameta virajam mano mayarpya sarvage. Coming to this conclusion of all knowledge, one should give up the false conception of material variety that one imposes upon the soul and thus sees one's material existence. The mind should be fixed on me, since I am all-pervading. So Krishna is saying, I'm all-pervading, but he is standing right in front of Uddhavji. See, one can say this is contradictory, but no. He can be everywhere there. He can be at the same place at the same time. Although in previous verses, Lord Shri Krishna has described the lifestyle and approach of the impersonal philosophers who meditate on the distinction between matter and spirit, the Lord here rejects the path of jnana or speculation and comes to the final conclusion, Bhakti Yoga. The path of jnana is interesting only to one who does not know that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Bahunam Janmanamante Jnanvan Prapadyate. The words Vasudeva Sarvamiti, or Vasudeva is everything, are similar to the words Sarvage found in this verse. One should know why the personality of Godhead is all-pervading. The first verse of Bhagavatam states, Janmadhyasya yata. The Supreme Lord is a source of everything, and as stated in the previous verse of this chapter, He creates, maintains, and annihilates everything. Thus, the Lord is not all-pervading in the manner of air or sunlight. Rather, the Lord is all-pervading as the absolute controller who holds in His hands the destiny of every living entity. It means He is everywhere, controlling everything. Everything is ultimately an expansion of Krishna, and therefore there is really no other object of meditation besides Krishna. Meditation upon any other object is also meditation on Krishna, but is imperfectly performed, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita by the word avidhipurvakam. The Lord also states in the Gita that all living entities are on the path back home, back to Godhead. Because of ignorance, however, some of them go backward or stop along the way, foolishly thinking that the journey is finished, when in fact they're suspended in one of the minor potencies of life. So all living entities are on the path back home. But some are going backwards, or some are stopping on the way, some are taking a detour, some have taken exit and gone somewhere else. It will take them time to come back on the right path and take up the process properly at the right speed. It takes time. If one wants to intimately understand the nature of the absolute truth, one must take to the path of love of Godhead. One can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead as He is only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of the Supreme Lord, by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. There's no other way. I'll just go to the last paragraph. Quoting from the Vivek, Srila Madhvacharya states that Nanatva Brahmam indicates the following illusions: considering the living entity to be the supreme, considering all living entities to be ultimately one, without individuality, considering that there are many gods, thinking that Krishna is God, not God. So these are all Brahm, all illusions. All of these illusions are called Brahm or mistakes, but such ignorance can be eliminated at once by chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra. But it takes long time to come to take to this chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So I guess I'll stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments. Okay, so you all have a safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri.
Hare Krishna.